You read in a foreign language because you want three things to happen. You want to acquire some new knowledge, you want to learn new words, but also you want to start using these new words. And here I want to demonstrate why it's important to bear in mind that those three things do not necessarily go hand in hand, that they are not the same, and how to make all of them work. I will talk about most common mistakes that beginner readers make, and I will give a few examples on a book that I have here, how to actually learn new words instead of just writing them down and or translating them. I want to begin with talking about the habit of reading. So the first mistake that beginner readers often will do is they will think that, okay, I'm learning English, so now I have to only read in English. And that's a mistake, because if your approach is to read a book, first of all, you will want to finish it no matter what. And it might well be that the book that you've chosen as your first read will not be the right book. So making yourself finish it, making yourself read it till the end, is actually a waste of time, might be a waste of time. Plus, it's not a good approach to reading in general. It's also, as I said in the previous video about watching movies, you don't just want to watch a movie, you don't just want to read a list of books, unless of course you just want to read a list of books to be able to tell that you've read this list of books. But ideally what you want to do is you want to create the continuity of this habit of reading. You want to be able to open a book whenever you like and just read it. And maybe you want to educate yourself on a topic, maybe you want to enter into a university abroad. Whatever it is, you want reading to become part of your life. And for that, there is not really a number of books that you should read. What I suggest you do is think about how much time in a week you have for reading. If you have 3 hours for reading, and if, let's say, you actually do read 1 hour a week, maybe devote half of this time to reading in a foreign language. But the rest of the time, the other half, continue reading in your own language. So that would be my advice number one. Don't completely ditch reading in your native language. You want to enjoy reading, but you also want to work towards becoming able to only read in English or any other language and be able to enjoy that too. But for that, you need to maintain this balance between doing the hard work, but also, taking time and read something just to enjoy yourself. You don't want to overdo it. Also, apart from choosing right time, you should choose the right place, the right atmosphere to read. I will tell you a true story that happened to one of my students. He told me that he just can't read because he lives with a roommate, and so the roommate is always at home and the roommate is always doing something. The roommate is cleaning, cooking, talking on the phone, receiving visitors in his room. So there were plenty of reasons why this student of mine couldn't start reading. But as soon as I started asking more questions, as soon as we started thinking about what was actually going on, we found that there was just 2 hours in a week when this student of mine was at home, but and he was alone, and he was playing the computer games. And so then we have a question. Do you want to continue wasting the only 2 hours of quiet and freedom you have on a computer game? Or do you want to teach yourself reading? But you see how it's not just about, choosing the time to read. Sometimes you have to reorganize a whole day completely, because he still wanted to play the game. And I was not suggesting that he, stopped playing computer games. So what he did, he reorganized his meeting with his friends on this online game so that they would meet another day when his roommate was home, because when he was playing the computer game, this student of mine, he was wearing headphones, so the presence of his roommate was not at all some distraction or an obstacle to playing a computer game online with his other friends. And so he had to reorganize his whole week to make these 2 hours a week for reading. And sure enough, he started reading, and in a little while that became a real habit, and he started reading on a continuous basis. So that was sort of point number 1 about habit of reading. My point number 2 is that there can be 2 modes of reading. So think about what I said in the beginning. When you read and understand the text, you're not necessarily learning new words. And so with that in mind, we can distinguish between reading for knowledge and reading for new words. I'll give you my personal example. Right now I'm trying to improve my Polish, and what I'm doing is I'm reading a book in Polish, but the book is on the topic that I feel quite good at. So I know what the book is about, but I'm reading it in a foreign language, in Polish. But mind you, I'm not reading the same book that I've already read. That's the second common mistake that my students also sometimes do, is they think that, okay, I'm learning English, so maybe I'll read the book that I like, the book that I've read in my native language, in English, in the original. That may be a good idea, but I generally do not recommend it. I don't like it. I don't like reading the same books. I don't like watching the same movies, so I never recommend it. But it works for some people. It doesn't work for me. What I suggest you do is read about the same topic, read about the in the field that you feel good at, but in the language that you're learning. Reading about the same material but in a different language also gives you this unique perspective. You are able to see how the same ideas, maybe even the same author's ideas, are expressed differently depending on the language that the book is translated into. The next point to make here is that I wouldn't recommend reading the book that you've always wanted to read. Let's say that you have some book on your list since 5 years ago that you've always wanted to read, but just haven't got round to doing it. I would not suggest starting with the book, because what it usually means is that the book would have been interesting back then when you found out about it, but now it might not be as interesting to read. So I would suggest finding a completely new book, unless you are, of course, sure that you will read the book. This next segment is about being patient. As we've already established, you don't just want to read a book. You want to always be reading. You want to create the habit. So don't expect to read a book in a week. If you read a book in a week in your native language, don't expect it to be as easy, not at least in the beginning of when you're just starting to read in English. Take your time, and gradually you will increase the speed of reading. Gradually you will be able to actually learn the book in a week. I mean, if you're reading a book in a week, I don't usually, I'm a slow reader. So the point here is that you don't want to dread reading in English. You want reading in English to be as natural as reading in whatever native language yours is. So when your teacher gives you texts to read, it's not about knowledge. You can't really get any systematic knowledge from the texts you receive as homework. What therefore is to introduce this, the process of reading, that after texts you can start with reading short stories and enjoy some fiction where there is no hard complex data to understand. But then gradually you can increase it. You can read magazines, articles, online posts on Instagram, your favorite bloggers, and then ease into reading larger books. So ease into it, don't force it onto you, because again, you don't want to be dreading reading in English. You want it to be natural. You want to, just sit down in your sofa and open a book and read it in peace without thinking how difficult it will be, how you will be sweating the whole process. You want reading to be part of you. You want reading to be part of your life. Being patient, as it turns out, is also a great skill when it comes to reading a book in a foreign language where there are many new words for you. Because, okay, some texts that you'll be reading will not have any new words, but some books will have a lot. So again, here you should find this balance between how many new words there are. If there are more than 7, 8 new words on a page, I would suggest trying a different book. But okay, so when you see a new word, don't just immediately jump to translating it. Don't just, open Google Translator and try to translate it. Instead, develop the guessing skill. It is very difficult usually in a spoken language. When you're talking to somebody, you don't have the time really, plus you're stressed because you're speaking with a person who speaks a language that you're just learning. So it is more difficult to do, to guess new words when you are speaking with a person, but reading in peace in the comfort of your own home gives you this unique opportunity to be able to take your time. You can read and reread the same paragraph all evening. There is no one to rush you, and that's again why it's important to find a good place and time for your reading. You don't want to do it on a bus stop. You want to do it on your sofa, in your armchair, at the table. The point here is that try to guess the word before you translate it. And when you are doing that, what you're actually also doing is that you are thinking about what author was trying to say. I'll give you an example. When we are reading texts in my class, some students will immediately try to stop me or stop reading if they're reading when they see a new word. Because in their mind, what they think is, okay, there's a new word, I don't know it, so I will not understand what the text is about or what the sentence is about. But I never let them do this. I never let them stop and go to translating the word. What I do instead is I ask them to finish at least the sentence, or better yet, the paragraph, and think out loud. Think with each other if it's a group class, or think together with me if it's one-on-one class. And think about what the idea was, not what the word meant, but what the idea of this paragraph was. And you see how those two things are not the same. A specific example from this week. I was reading a text with this lady, and there was a word providing. It was in a combination with providing assistance. And she didn't know either of the words. So she asked me what it meant, and I asked her, okay, but in the beginning it said that these people need our help, so we are here to provide our assistance. And so she immediately guessed. She asked me, does it mean something like helping? And I said, yes, you see, that's the idea. It means something like helping. She didn't translate the word directly, but she understood what it means. And in the earlier stages of reading, that would be the goal. To be able to feel the language, sort of, to be able to get used to hearing not a word, but a sentence. When you're talking to somebody, that's what you're doing. You're not trying to catch every single word. When you're listening to a story, you're expecting the beginning and the ending. You're expecting to see it as a complete thing. It's not just a number of words. A story is the sum of every word is more than every single word separately. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense here. When you're trying to guess the meaning of the new word, when you're thinking about what the author might be saying, you should also always think about how you can make this word yours, how you can use the word to talk about your experience, your opinions, your ideas, your friends, etc. I'll give you an example. So let's say we're in class and we're reading a text, and it says, Alex was a gregarious fella. Now, let's say that neither before this paragraph nor after there is no other information about Alex, so we have to use the dictionary. We have to use the Google Translator to understand what gregarious means. But does it mean that we should stop thinking? Not at all. What I would do in this example, I would ask my students, Think of any other word in English which has greg in it. So we have gregarious. Maybe there is another word in English that has this greg. And let's say that one of the students immediately comes up with the word congregation. Okay, so we can think, what is a congregation? Congregation. When you say congregation, you think of a church. Okay, so congregation is a group of people that come to church. The church part isn't relevant, but it's a group of people. Then somebody else in the group who is interested in business, he remembers that he saw the word aggregate, the aggregate sum, the aggregate number. And again, it's a sum total of something. So aggregate or congregation has to do with the group of something. So what we can do at this stage is we can check the etymology of the word gregarious. And it comes down to the Latin grex, which means a flock, a group of animals. And it makes a lot of sense. Congregation, group, aggregate, sum, it's a group of numbers. So Alex is gregarious, sociable, friendly. But also here, there's another thing to point out. How the word gregarious is different from the word sociable. So Alex is a person that is the most Alex in a group, so he aggregates people around him. Where there is Alex, there is a congregation. But sociable, able to be in a society, so a person who can be with people, a person who is good with people. But gregarious, no, it's a person which aggregates people around him. I know it might sound like I'm stretching it, and maybe I am a little bit, but it is an important exercise to see how two synonyms are different. And that brings us to the point of this so-called intermediate plateau, where students will be already capable, will know English at the stage good enough to be able to read in English, but they will encounter the problem of learning new words but not being able to use them, or just using the old ones out of the habit. And when you're reading a book and you see a synonym to the word which you already know, like gregarious, sociable, friendly, if you just translate it, you will not remember it. You will translate it, and in your mind you will think, oh, it means sociable. So now your mind thinks, well, why does it say gregarious? Okay, sociable. Let's remember sociable. Let's make it easier. But no, if you think of it, if you think of how gregarious is different from sociable, you will see these connections, you will see the extra color. Magenta, it's not just light violet. You see the point. Also, some of these words, the more boring thing that you can do is check which word is formal, which word is informal. But it's a lot more fun to see the etymology, to see how it's connected with some other more natural, more everyday objects, like grex, a flock, group of people, person who has a lot of people around him, gregarious. I would like to finish it with an excerpt from Kenko, a Japanese poet. With what? Excerpt? What does it mean? Well, if you just go and translate, you will find that it means fragment. But you can also think, like, I'm not going to read the whole book, right? I'm going to read a part of something, a fragment, an excerpt. Like exit, is when you take something out. Okay, so here it goes. I will read. It's quite short. It's just 8 lines. And then we will talk about 3 new words that will be here. One morning, after a beautiful fall of snow, I had reason to write a letter to an acquaintance, but I omitted to make any mention of the snow. I was delighted when she responded, "Do you expect me to pay any attention to the words of someone so perverse that he fails to inquire how I find this snow landscape? What deplorable insensitivity!" The lady is no longer alive, so I treasure even this trifling memory. Let's say that the 3 new words for you would be omitted. I omitted to make any mention of the snow. Inquire. He fails to inquire how I find the snowy landscape. And deplorable, in deplorable insensitivity. Now, it's clear that omit means something like didn't. He failed to ask, he didn't ask her. So omit means didn't, inquire means ask, and deplorable, that's just something negative. Clearly she didn't like his behavior, so she expressed her that she didn't like it. So we can remember it as such, of course, didn't like it, or something negative, and move on. But should you move on? Now it's important to understand at what stage of sort of reading or learning to read you are. If it's your first or second book in English, you can of course move on, and maybe you should. You should congratulate yourself, and no irony here, you should congratulate yourself that you've understood what you were reading and move on and finish the book. But if it's already the 10th book that you're reading, maybe you should do some more exploration. How these 3 words are different from the words that you already know. What are these nuances? How this word is more magenta than violet, you see? We've talked about etymologies, but you don't have to always go as far back as Latin. You can Google omit word formation, and you can find that whereas to omit is a verb, the noun form would be omission. And now immediately you think, oh, that sounds like mission. So mission is when you put somewhere on a path, when you send them to do something. But omission is when you don't do this. So mission is when you put words, but he omitted the words. He didn't put the words on the paper. He didn't put the words in the letter that he sent to this lady. Now with inquire, you can think of other English words. Maybe you will immediately think of the word require. So require is when there are job requirements. That means that the employer asks you to have certain qualities. But he doesn't just ask, they demand that you have these qualities. But inquire, as clearly from this context, it's when you're asking about her opinion of the lady. So to require means to ask, to demand, you should have this, you must be this and that. But inquire, you are interested in what this person might think. Okay, maybe we should also dive into etymology of this word. You can find that it comes down to the Latin quiero. And if you know Spanish, you can immediately think, oh, that's like quiero, which means to want. And yes, that's what it means. To want. In Latin, it meant also to look, to seek, to look for, to seek. So inquire, you are seeking you're looking to understand the opinion of the person. So it's more than to ask. And sure enough, the word inquire is more formal in the modern day English. You wouldn't inquire from your friend how he spent the weekend. You would ask him, but you would inquire as to the state of the art of whatever. So it's more poetic, it's more formal. The last word was deplorable. If you know French, you might think that it has something to do with pleurer, to cry. And sure enough, that's what it means. In Latin, plorare, that meant crying out, crying, weeping. So what he did, or rather what he didn't do, this guy from the text, is so bad that he should be weeping about how insensitive he is. I'll just read the fragments once again so we can refresh the memory. He fails to inquire how I find this snowy landscape. What deplorable insensitivity. So she's not just saying you're stupid or you're unobservative, you are unimaginative. She says you are all that and you should weep about how bad it is. You're so miserable that you just didn't notice this beautiful snowy landscape and didn't ask me how I feel about it. That's deplorable, that's miserable, that's abominable. You should be weeping about how bad it is. That's what it means. So it's not just bad, it's so bad that you should weep. Just to summarize all of that briefly, don't overestimate yourself. Don't expect to read a book in a week, even if you do this in your native language. Be patient. learn to think, learn to guess the meaning of the new word. Don't rush to translation. And think about how the words are diverse. Learn to see the color, learn to see the hue, learn to see how magenta is different from violet, learn to see how sociable, friendly, and gregarious, although being synonyms, are not completely synonymous. They are still different. They express different sides of maybe the same, maybe not the same, maybe just similar reality. Something can be empty or vacuous. Somebody can be intelligent, smart, clever, bright. Synonyms mean similar things, not the same. Also, learn the skill of connecting words of different languages. There are many words in your language which will sound almost the same or maybe even identical to the new words in English that you will learn. And there are two things to remember. First of all, they always mean something similar, and second of all, they never mean completely the same thing. So if you see English intelligent, it's not the same as Polish inteligentny. They are still somewhat different. Learn to think, learn to use dictionaries, start Googling etymology. That will give you far more than you can imagine now, because by just remembering what the word means, you would remember the equivalent in your language, but by understanding how this word came to be, you will learn all the nuances, all the layers of meaning that this word has. Remember this: quiero, quiero, require. So you are looking for something, you are seeking out. Yes, and remember that language is very ancient, it's very peculiar, and it's very exciting, and it is worth being patient and taking your time to read in peace and quiet, and not just remember the word, but learn the word and also start using this word.